Hello, everyone. If you are just joining us right now, we are starting our second presentation, Transitions in Life. My name is Lucelia Jong, and I am a resource coordinator and librarian here at Adapt Community Network. Before we get started, we want to do some housekeeping notes once again. If you have questions for our presenters, please use the Q&A feature. Just click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, type your question, and hit send. The chat box will be used only for sharing helpful links and information about Adapt Community Network and this webinar, including how to access translation, which you will find posted there soon. So please keep an eye out on the chat. Now, we do ask you to keep all of your questions general in nature, since today's session is meant to share overall information and not address personal situations. And just a quick reminder, please do not include any personal details or sensitive information. Now, we do want to bring to your attention that if your connection were to drop during the session, do not worry or panic. You can just simply rejoin using the same link that was emailed to you in the invitation. We understand that technical issues, as you might have seen, could arise. And if you missed any content at all, kindly visit our website after the summit at www.adaptcommunitynetwork.org, and be sure to follow us on social media at Adapt We Change. We truly appreciate your patience and continued participation through our summit today. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome to today's session Dr. Lori Volpe. Dr. Lori Volpe has 40 years experience working with adults and children with ASD, that's autism, and other developmental disabilities in educational, residential, and vocational settings. In addition to her position with Birch Training Institute, Lori has also worked for agencies in the New York area, developing and opening programs for individuals in the autism spectrum, as well as providing consulting services to agencies and schools on Long Island, Westchester, and NYC. She holds a bachelor's in psychology from SUNY at Albany, a master's degree in developmental psychology from Yeshiva University, master's degree in school psychology, and a PhD in clinical psychology, both from Hofstra University. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lori Volpe.
Good morning. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Here we go. So good morning. So there are many transitions that the individual and their families go through over the course of their lives in the educational and support services system. So it starts out in those early years. Diagnosis, EI services, applying for those services. Then at 2.5 or so, children are applying to CPSE for preschool special ed services. We move through those special ed preschool services, and then we start thinking about school age and that whole turning 5 process. Where is my child going to go to school? Where are they going to start their sort of traditional academic career? Is it going to be in the local public school? Is it going to be in an adjoining district? Is it going to be in a BOCES or a District 75 program if you're in the city? Or in a non-public setting, such as Birch or some of the other agencies that are out there, depending on what is the most appropriate fit for your child. You go through these processes of evaluations and looking at placements and what is right for my child. Trying to find the best fit you can, because clearly everyone wants their child to achieve as much as they can achieve. And so finding that correct program is, what parents are looking to do. We get into the beginning of the school age programs. Our little ones from preschool are moving into kindergarten. And now the CSE process begins as they go through. Now it's instead of CPSE, which is the preschool Committee on Special Education, we now move into CSE. Similar in many ways in terms of the process of navigating the CSE, the beginning of kindergarten. And those generally, you're going to have those annual meetings where you'll be discussing your child's IEP and their progress and, next year's goals coming up, what support services are in place, are those support services adequate or not adequate, making all those decisions for your child. And as was brought up in the previous presentation, really wherever your child can, along the way through this process, having them participate where and when they can, depending on the age and stage and abilities of that child, but certainly knowing what their skills and aspirations are, especially as they get a little bit older. We talk about by time your child gets towards that middle part of elementary school, to really start thinking about getting yourself aligned with a care coordination organization, because it is through a care coordination organization that your child is going to have access to all kinds of OPWDD Medicaid services. And so those are the people that you reach out to, get yourself set up with them, and they will coordinate those services. At this point, it is really through the care coordination. We don't make direct application to OPWDD or to Medicaid. Those it all goes through a care coordination organization, and it is truly better to do it earlier than later, because you want your child to be able to have whatever services and supports the family needs from as early as possible, because it is a process in terms of paperwork and things like that that need to be secured and organized. So you want to make sure you do that as early as possible so that you have those supports going forward for your child. Then as your child kind of gets into that 10, 11-year-old age, then you're thinking about middle school programs. What's the appropriate middle school program? Is my child still going to be in an academic track, or am I seeing their needs being more life skills track? Those are the things you start to think about in terms of what are their needs. And then as you continue to move along, you try to decide, how do I want to use services? And find out about your local developmental disabilities regional office. And you find out about Front Door, which is where you can self-direct how your Medicaid funds are used for your family member. By time your child begins high school and begins to think about high school, you want to think about, well, what are their options in terms of the diploma track that they may or may not be on? What is the most appropriate fit for your child? And what do each of those diploma tracks offer my child in terms of when they leave high school? What does that mean for them? What are the options that may be open for them? And then we start to think about, as a child, gets into those later um, high school years. And in New York State right now, whether your child gets to stay in school until they're 21, 22, or somewhere in between is going to be based on your district. Some districts, they've gone back to 21. Some districts, you can stay in school in now until your 22nd year. Um, and through, regardless of when your birthday is, you can stay through the entire school year as you used to be for 21. And there are some districts where you get to attend high school through your 21st year, 364 days. And so your last day of school, regardless of where it falls during the school year, falls on that 364th day. So when you turn 22, you're now a graduate. So you have to find out through your local district what the what's the rule for your district, because it does differ district by district. There at this point, there hasn't been a statewide mandate put in place. Districts have been able to decide for themselves. But it is in high school that we start to talk about your child's transition plan. It may have been early on in high school, late, middle school, early on in high school, a little more informal, some of the discussions that may be happening. But by time your child turns 15, that transition plan needs to be a formal part of your child's IEP. There needs to be some thought and discussion as to what does your child want to do beyond high school? What are their aspirations? Are they looking to go into a vocational setting? Are they looking to go into a day hab setting, whether a day hab with walls or without walls? Are they looking for community habilitation? So it's important to start to look at all the options that are out there and available, and those become part of the student's formal transition plan as part of their IEP. In terms of helping them to develop, have goals, and to develop the skills that will set them on that road towards attaining whatever their aspiration is beyond the high school setting. So it's very jarring for many families when their child graduates. It is often referred to by many families as falling off the cliff because the service system becomes very different. Whereas there is a mandate, a federal mandate, that all children are entitled to a free and appropriate public education, that mandate disappears once your child leaves the school system. There are services that are out there and available for adults with special needs who are in need of all kinds of support services. However, there is not enough programs out there for all the people who need them, which is an unfortunate situation. I think more and more we have come to recognize that children grow into adults. And for these adults, most people with intellectual disabilities nowadays, intellectual and developmental disabilities, most are living the same lifespan as the rest of us because medical technology has improved to the degree that those things, the medical issues that may have shortened the lives with people with intellectual developmental disabilities, many of those issues can now be medically treated. So many of these individuals are living the same lifespans as the rest of us. So more and more programs, more and more agencies are looking towards opening and developing programs for adults because we realize that beyond graduation, these are people who are, what are they doing for the next 50 years? That is the thought in all of our heads. What are these people doing? What is the quality of their life going to look like for the next 50 years? What kind of supports and services do they need? What kind of things do they aspire to as adults? So these are all things that need to be considered when you're sitting in that meeting during those transition years where you get to put these things in your child's IEP is to think about, what does my child aspire to? What do we as his family members aspire to for him, if they are not fully able to express their aspirations, but to for the family to understand what that person wants, needs, enjoys in their life. So this is again, a team effort between those in school, the individual and their family, to work through that transition plan, so that when graduation comes, that they will have built the supports and services that they need to get them to where they aspire to be. So when we looked a little bit at the reason behind many adults having difficulty navigating the adult world, what we found is that there are, many things that came up as challenges that put the quality of life or the quality of services that a person was getting, that it really wasn't fulfilling their needs. And some of the things that came up, some of the key challenges that came up, is that transition plan that should have been part of their child's IEP prior to leaving the school system wasn't well developed. And so we want to make sure that that's something that you're really focused on, and that if there's not a specific transition coordinator in your family members high school program, that you find out who is responsible for creating the transition plan, because it is a formal part of the IEP. And so you want to make sure that you're getting good direction and support for that. And if there isn't a specific person, there may be some outreach that needs to be done to the school to make sure that that does happen, that there is a more appropriate, more thorough plan put in place, because your child is entitled to that. Um, Again, sometimes there are employment barriers. Oftentimes these barriers are because we don't recognize that there are jobs out there that many individuals with some modifications, and oftentimes minor modifications, can participate in. It's also about educating employers about the skills of these individuals, and where they often can fill a space within an organization, an employment need that an employer has, and they may not realize that these are people who can fulfill that niche. That's one of the things at Birch, amongst the other things that we do, along with our schools and our residential programs, is our employment program. And part of that is I also go and I speak to some of our potential employers who either will hire some individuals on a trial basis or on an internship basis, or offer them full employment, is talking to them about the what may look different in how some of the individuals we support may present, but how that may fill a niche in their organization, and the kinds of no cost, low cost, minor accommodations that an individual may need, that is really of no great burden to the employer, but then help puts that person in a place of good employment that's fulfilling their aspirations for a quality life, to be able to have employment, and is fulfilling that organization's need for an employee. And so sometimes it's about educating not only the individual, but potential employers as well. And again, the social isolation that many of the individuals that we work with, that they experience, and that many of the families experience. Oftentimes, depending on who the individual is and the challenges that they may display, again, when other people are not aware and not well versed in understanding that different people function in different ways, and different is not necessarily bad, different is just different. Um, it sometimes creates some social barriers. for individuals, and it creates barriers in them being able to make connections with others. They may have challenges with being able to communicate in what other people assume as typical ways. They may be using, augmentative devices, whether it be an electronic system or a low-tech system, and other people may not understand that or understand things like the processing delays of communication, both expressive and receptive. And again, many of these individuals, there's this kind of myth out there that especially people on the spectrum don't want to socialize. And that's absolutely a myth. They want social connections as much as anyone else. The challenge they have is they don't know how to navigate the social relationships. And again, sometimes school programs are not doing enough to help students build their social skills to the level at which they want to, expand upon them. And therefore, many of these individuals recognize that although they want to have friends and relationships, they don't know what to do. And so it creates a lot of social anxiety, and therefore they will sometimes avoid. So it's not that they don't want these relationships, but they will avoid social situations because it causes them so much anxiety because they're aware of the fact that there are things that they just don't know. And this also then becomes an impediment to their quality of life upon graduating, because they then really are just sitting in their parents' homes and not doing that outreach. And so helping to develop a plan that makes that person feel comfortable and allows them to have those connections with the people they do want to have connections with, can be very, very important when we're thinking about what are we working on in school with our students. Again, we think about the opportunities for independent living. Again, like most of the other programs that are out there for adults, with all kinds of intellectual and developmental disabilities, there are not enough um, supportive living situations or more independent living situations. When the institutions were originally closed, we went from the big institutions to group homes, which was certainly better and more integrated into the community and more familial like than living in an institutional setting. However, we've also come to realize there are individuals who are capable of living still with some support, but more independently. And those things, those kinds of programs, again, we're growing in those kinds of programs, but we're first, most agencies are first growing into that now, where the focus historically has been on that group home setting. We're really looking at those individuals who have the potential, either because currently they're living in a group home setting. However, they do have the skills, they have developed the skills over the course of their time in living in that congregate setting where they could be living more independently, or they're still living at home but really do have good foundational skills that with some just minimal level of support, they could be living in a more independent setting. It's just a matter of there being enough of these programs and people to support those programs being available to provide that support for the individual. Certainly, we know healthcare access and understanding, both for the individual and the healthcare system, can be very challenging. Many doctors, well, while they're very good at treating medical conditions, are not necessarily always well versed in understanding how to support the other needs of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, especially as it impacts their health care. Understanding that, how do I support someone being able to make good and appropriate and consenting decisions for themselves? Are they being given the information in a manner in which they can understand so they can consent to or not consent to medical procedures? and being able to have the ability to communicate that well with their medical provider, so that it's not just the people who are supporting them giving that information, but again, as the previous presentation talked about, but that person being able to advocate for themselves in terms of the health care they want and don't want in their lives, and being able to do that in a with reasonable information. And we certainly know as people go through life, um, our support systems change as we age, as our parents age, as other people in our life who have been more and less involved in our lives. Sometimes that shifts and changes. Um, and we want to sort of have some plan in place as to who may take on a that kind of parent centered role that it started with. How can the individual um, support themselves and advocate for themselves more appropriately, and who may that support person be when the parent is no longer able to do it? Is there a sibling who is now going to take on that sort of custodial kind of role in supporting their sibling? Is there another family member? Is there a trusted family friend? That decisions about how that support system will function going forward is important to have that continuity of care. And so that there's planning in advance, so that we minimize the surprises in people's lives, because we know that typically does not go well when there is a lot of indecision and decisions are having to be made because now there's a crisis moment. The parent that was caring for this individual now has had a medical crisis of their own, and can no longer care for their family member in the home. And so now we're scrambling to try to find something for this individual. So hopefully, as part of your transition plan, this has been discussed. Who does the individual themselves? Who do they want to be there if they're able to make that choice? They should have as much as they can, participate in that decision making as who do they want as their ongoing support. When mom and dad may not be able to do that anymore, who would they like to have step in and do that? And so, we want to make sure that that's worked out well ahead. And the unfortunate thing is, we're well aware of the fact that there is still um, a stigma and still discrimination around people having intellectual and developmental disabilities. There's still a good bit of mythology out there about what having an intellectual or developmental disability means and doesn't mean. And so part of, almost in some ways, the advocacy that an individual does for themselves, we also want to be doing for the whole community. That not only the individuals themselves, but those of us who support them really need to be part of that societal support system in advocating for people with developmental disability, and helping people who don't, who are not involved, who may not be exposed to people who are significantly different than themselves, that they are entitled to the same rights as the typically developing person, and that they have aspirations for a quality of life that everyone else has aspirations for. So that is kind of the ongoing work that continues to go on in supporting the whole community of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the whole spectrum of need for support and functioning, is to really kind of educate the general community in how these are just other members of society and they're entitled to the same things as everyone else. So some of the things that can ease that transition, again, the earlier you get in there and start developing skills for the individual, the more that you get involved in, getting involved with that CCO, so that you get plans and supports and services in place as early as possible. As was said earlier, developing those advocacy skills, whether it's advocacy by the individual themselves, but it's also about families becoming educated about what they and their family are entitled to as well. So it's important because sometimes in meetings at schools, you don't always necessarily get the full picture of what you're entitled to. So it's really important to push for those things and to seek out what are the services and supports that we're entitled to. Also looking at those community-based programs. Not everything necessarily is coming directly through the schools. There are community-based programs that provide for all kinds of skill development, vocational skills, social skills, independent living skills, but also for social and recreational development as well. So you want to kind of seek out all your options. Um, it's really important that as many family members who are involved in that individual's life are also involved in the IEP process and in that transition planning process. Because again, especially if there are siblings who are going to take over this involvement and this advocacy at some point down the line when the parents are no longer able to do it and their siblings are growing into this position. You want them to know what's been done and been said all along, so that they can do this with knowledge and with also an awareness of what are the aspirations of the individual themselves, because again, we want to make sure that this is always person-centered. Yes, there are things that, families aspire to and parents aspire to for their children, but we really have to focus on thinking about that this is a person who has the right to say what goes on in their life, just as any other adult has that right. And so we want to make sure that everyone is aware of what are the aspirations of this person themselves. Looking for those both, job coaching opportunities, whether it goes, through the school program or if there's something available in the community. Again, oftentimes your care coordination organization can help you with this in terms of finding opportunities for work experience, to help build a resume, to help build not only specific vocational skills, but all those soft skills related to going to work, to help develop those skills so that hopefully by time that person is ready to make that transition, again, they will have more skills under their belt that helps get them to where they want to go beyond the school system. And again, we always want to make sure that whatever plans are being put in place, that they are person-centered in the sense that we're focusing on the individual goals of that individual person. Because we certainly know that motivation for all of us, not just people with disabilities, but motivation for all of us is a tremendous factor in learning. And so we want to make sure that if we're trying to help build a transition plan for this person, and we're talking about the goal plan, which is, what skills this person need to work on to achieve that transition that they want to make it to. Well, is that transition what they want? So are those skills what they want? Because is that transition what they want? We want to make sure that everyone is on board with it, that everybody is in tune with what the desires of this person is, because the individual themselves are not going to be motivated to work on developing those skills if it's not the goal that they're aspiring to. So care coordination. This becomes the real central focus of everything right now. It is really important, and I really encourage families to do this as early in your child's life as possible. You can do this from the moment your child is diagnosed. You're entitled to these services. And so the sooner you get hooked up with a care coordination organization and are assigned a care coordinator, case manager, the better for your child, the better for your family, because being enrolled in a CCO is required for any of the programs for that are run through OPWDD, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, the Home and Community-Based Services Waiver, all go through the CCO. So you know, it's not something that you can apply independently to. You cannot just make application to OPWDD. They don't want to hear from individual families. It doesn't work that way anymore. It has to go through care coordination. So the sooner you apply for it, the better off you're going to be, because this is someone who their whole job is providing for your child. What supports and services does this person need? In their whole, it is 100% person-centered. It's not about necessarily, sometimes things do and don't get into someone's IEP because, the school doesn't have that program, access to that program, a professional who teaches that thing. But a CCO is allowed to reach out to whoever provides that service. They are not bound to, as the school is, what's available in our school. They have a much narrower access to supports and services, where the CCO can reach out to whoever and wherever the appropriate services that an individual might need are being offered. So they can build that for the individual, for the family, on whatever supports and services they may need. And those things grow and develop and change over the course of an individual's life. So again, the sooner that these things get in place, you will then have people who then have a history with the individual themselves as they grow and develop, and their skills develop, and they develop aspirations at different points in their lives. So it started, all this with the CCO started back in 2018. It took a while for it to get in place, but it is now fully in place. And again, it is the care coordination system that is put in place to provide for that comprehensive, person-centered care planning for an individual. And it's their job to really take care of both the long-term acute, kinds of things, and chronic situations, and just helping to plan for all the supports and services an individual may need and want. So care coordination, that, home health homes, provide these 6 core care functions. And really, as you look at these, you can see that it really attends to, all the different aspects of an individual's life that may need to be, taken care of. And so each of these aspects is going to support the individual in having the life that they aspire to have. And that's our goal for them, is to get as close to that aspiration, all aspects of that aspiration, as we can, help them achieve. Again, through the CCO, what the individual and the family will do is sitting down with the individual and their family and other people who are part of that individual's circle of support, is to come up with a person-centered life plan. And sort of similar to an IEP, it lays out what are the goals that this individual aspires to? What are the things that they want to learn, develop, participate in? And who are these things going to be assigned to carry these things out? What organization, what program? All these things get assigned to a provider. And again, like the IEP, this is what we are bound to. is that life plan in this is this individual's aspiration as to how they want to see their life going, how they want their quality of life to be supported. So again, this is an ongoing and developing, the life plan is what I often describe as a living document, because we all, as we go through life and are exposed to different things, we may discover that there's things that we never knew about, that we now do know about, that we are now interested in. And so that may change our aspirations and our trajectory for what goals we have for ourselves. So the life plan is a person-centered and a living document that changes as that person's wants and desires change, as they learn new things and make decisions about, oh, I'd like to do this now. Before I thought that, but now I've been exposed to this, and this is what I really want to be doing now. And we may have to make sure that when that person is participating in the coming together of the life plan, that we're presenting to them in a manner that's understandable to them. We have to make sure the vocabulary that we're using is meaningful and understandable to them. Because again, this is about them and about what their aspirations are. Certainly supported by their circle of support, but we want to get, as close to as humanly possible, what are the personal aspirations of this individual. Although other people in their circle of support are all well-intentioned, we want to make sure that it's really very person-driven. It's about what this person wants, as opposed to necessarily only what their family wants. So some options that are out there, community habilitation. So having an individual go out and have support of, where it's an individualized program. And this is, for people who are not living in an OPW certified or operated residential program. So people who are still, people who are living in their own home, or people living still in their family home, but still may need some support in developing all kinds of skills. Adaptive ADL skills for themselves, learning how to travel, maybe some work-related skills, things like that, for themselves. So that's kind of an option in terms of day services for individuals. There's Dayhab. There's both Dayhab, what is often called Dayhab without walls, where individuals they may go to a center-based, program to initially meet up, and then they go out into the community and participate in all different kinds of social, recreational activities, and are learning community-based skills in more of a supportive group setting. Currently, the majority of Dayhab programs are without walls programs. There are still some with walls programs for individuals who want or need just a site-based program. They don't want something community-based, but generally you have to have a rationale as to why not. Because the mindset of OPWDD is they really want everyone as fully integrated into the community as they can and want to be. And so that's why there's been a significant push for the majority of these day habilitation programs to be without walls programs, is because they are community based. But there are some individuals, for a variety of reasons, who either don't want a community based program, or whose needs at this point in time in their life, it just is not the appropriate setting for them yet. And so Again, that's a decision that the individual and their circle of support need to make as to what is the best fit for them. Front door is another option. This is when the individual themselves chooses the services and supports that they want to need, that they want. And it is provided to them in a very individualized way. The challenge with this is, though, is that it then falls to the individual, their family, their circle of support, to hire all the people and manage all the people that will be working with this individual. And again, it becomes much the upside of this, the real pro side of this, is that it is very, very personalized. And it really helps them build the skills and relationships and their integration into the community in a way that is maximally personalized to what the desires of this person was. The challenge is, though, is that it becomes a job for the family, because now they are hiring, firing, directing the staff who are supporting their family member or the person that they support. The only part that the family doesn't have to do is the payment part. That goes through an intermediary, because again, it's Medicaid funds, so that gets paid through Medicaid. So they get to choose who works with their family member, and then the fiscal intermediary takes care of the payment. So it is positive in the sense of how personalized it can be. However, it does put a great deal of the onus on how things go on the family, which can sometimes be a little bit challenging for some. Certainly, there's plenty of things that are out there. There are plenty of people who want to and can be working. And so OPWDD does support employment and helping people to develop skills that will get them into a paid position, either part-time or full-time, whether it's partially integrated or fully integrated kind of services and supports. And so there are programs out there that will help the person develop both of their vocational skills and all those social skills that are needed, those sort of what they call the soft skills, in terms of being able to attain and maintain employment. And so OPWDD does support those programs as well, when it is appropriate for the person. There's all kinds of, again, all different routes to employment depending on what the skill set and needs are, and desires are of the person. So there's something called Pathways to Employment. So that is a year-long program where the individual gets to sort of be rotated through a variety of different kinds of jobs, because maybe they weren't exposed to enough while they were in high school, and so they're not really sure they know that they want a job, but they're not really sure where their skills would fit best, what kind of job they would actually want, because of limited exposure, to know what they do or they don't like. So it helps to give them that information so they can make an informed decision about what they want to do in the future, where they see themselves being based on the exposure they have to that. So that's one of the potential um, ways of working towards employment. Again, there are certainly pre-vocational services out there where if someone is sort of already knows, oh, I really love music. And so I want to work at something involved with, working in, something to involve with music. And so they maybe get an internship working at a music store where they're helping people pick out, sheet music and deciding what instruments they want to play and help build their skills when they already have kind of a mindset of what they want to do. And so that helps develop their skills specifically within an area of interest. So there again, as of 2023, there's certainly a lot of 7 service providers out there who are providing skills-based services through the Home and Community-Based Services Waiver Program. And it's more of a real job training program, very job specific, career specific training programs, so that they can, and so they actually receive a certificate. So these are more trade based programs, so that once individuals complete these programs, they actually have a certificate within a real skill area to then be able to get a job. So more of the kind of the hands-on kind of industries. So these are these career-based programs, the agencies that that they're provided through, the kinds of skills that that people are working on within these programs. Again, housing. There's all kinds of options. Again, depending on what the desires of the individual are, what their skill set is, because certainly we want people to be in a living environment which is safe for them, and provides them with all the things that they need in a home environment. So certainly, we want people to, live as independently as they aspire to live. Certainly there are people who can and do live more independently, but there are other people who choose to live in congregate settings, may choose to live in a situation in which maybe they have a roommate instead of living all on their own, but they can make all kinds of decisions for themselves. And so it's what kind of living environment someone's gonna, be in is gonna be based on what their skills are, what their resources are, what their needs are, in terms of living in the community. There's also an option where an individual can choose to have a live-in caregiver or live in sort of almost a boarding house kind of situation where they have their own room, they pay their rent, they do all those things, but there's support in the house. So it's kind of a familial kind of setting. Again, that paid neighbor who's on call, person lives independently, but they have someone who gets paid to drop in on them on a regular basis to make sure that everything that they need to be doing, anything that they need reminders for. Did you remember to make your doctor's appointments? Did you refill your medications? Did you remember to pay your phone bill? Those kinds of things. And any kind of environmental modifications that may need to be made to a person's home to be able to stay in their home. Does this person need grab bars in the bathroom? Do they need, ramp by the front door? Whatever it is that they may need, these things can be provided for. Again, family care, sort of like the foster care system, but it's for adults. And it's not foster care in the sense that it's the person is there as long as they want to be there. But they're, an adult person going into another family's home to live with that family as a member of their family. And again, all of their needs within that, would be provided for. And again, accounting for, people's personal desires. Certainly, people get to get to choose who they live with. So certainly being able to live with a family that maybe shares a similar cultural background because that's important to this person. All those things would be taken into account because you want, those things supported for this person because it's important in their life. So all those things, may be in place for the person, for the individual who desires them. And there's certainly group home settings, both operated by OPWDD or certified by OPWDD. Congregate settings of various sizes, living in the community with a fairly high level of staff support, direct support professionals who provide for the individuals on an ongoing basis 24/7, that they're provided for their needs, and are also, again, working on skills. The DSPs should be supporting the individuals in helping them to develop a higher level of independence, both in their home skills and in their community-based skills and their self-care skills, to help them also become as independent as possible within the house they currently live in, or even looking towards the aspiration of ultimately potentially moving into a more independent living environment, should this be something that the person aspires to. This is certainly a step along the way, potentially, for someone who wants and needs it. Um, there's a whole idea that it's called money follows the person program, this open door program. And the whole idea is to help people who are living in these more restrictive type settings, people who are still in ICFs, people who are in nursing or hospital settings, but want to live in a more community based setting. And so it's to help provide funding for those kinds of programs to help move those people into more community integrated settings than they are currently living in. And again, open door allows you to say, how and where you live. Um, so, we want to help people and support people, in transitioning from those more restrictive settings to a more independent setting, a less restrictive setting, where a person has more opportunities to go and come as they choose. And so these are all kind of avenues for moving in that direction if this is what a person aspires to and it's reasonably safe for them to do. So with that, that takes me to my questions.
Hello, Dr. Volpe. What a wonderful presentation. I do want to let our participants know that we are going to start question and answer session right now. So please start submitting your questions for Dr. Volpe through the Q&A section of your Zoom toolbar, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So, Doctor, I want to start with this question. Are there any specialized universities for children with special needs?
Yes, actually there are. There are a number of colleges. Off the top of my head, I know of two here on Long Island. New York Tech runs a program where individuals both work on developing their independent skills, but they're also working on some entry-level college work and sometimes vocational things. There's also a program up in Boston at Lesley University. I forgot the name of the program, but they also have a similar program, and there are more programs like that all over the country.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now, do you have any tips for family members who have been trying to get habilitation for a few years for their child and they keep getting denied?
It's very challenging. The problem is, unfortunately, there are not enough programs out there, in terms of site-based programs. What I would really encourage, and oftentimes the reason why someone's not accepted to a program is they may have left school still having one-to-one for behavioral reasons on their IEP. And the reality of a lot of the adult programs is they just don't have the staffing to support that. So sometimes these are the families that it may be the better option to at least begin with going front door to help their family member develop those skills that would then help support them getting into a site-based program so that they will still have some skill development. They're not just sitting home along the way, because that they are entitled to.
Definitely. Now, can you elaborate on what person-centered services mean in practice, especially for adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities who might have limited communication skills?
So it's about knowing the individual. Just because a person may not be able to verbalize what their aspirations are, um, certainly people who use augmentative systems. I've had people who tell me all kinds of things and way more than I knew that they understood when we found the right system for them. But I think it's really important for people who know the individual well. What does this, when this person has free time, what do they turn to all the time? What do they consistently, given choices, what are they always choosing to do? What are the things that they avoid? So it's really important sometimes when the person, whether it's just limited communication in general, that there is a good support system around this person who knows the person, who can then convey that information based on their experience with this person, and having hopefully they've exposed them to enough different opportunities to be able to make certain, provide that information. Have taken this person here, didn't like it, went to this place and this place, loved it. Those kinds of things that would help kind of give people information about what this person might aspire to if they can't themselves.
Definitely and very important, right? Now, what are the most significant differences between the school-based system and the adult support service system that families should be preparing for?
I think the biggest thing that I think is shocking to families is there's no longer a mandate. You're not entitled to anything anymore, except for, Medicaid and Social Security check. You're not entitled to a program anymore. Whereas when your child was in school, they were entitled to be in school, and they were entitled to whatever supports and services they needed to be able to participate in being in the school system. And as adults, now everything is eligibility. Yes, you are eligible, but you only get a seat if we have a seat. Schools have to open another classroom. If they don't have enough seats for the students applying, they have to open another classroom. Unfortunately, there's not enough programs for adults, and if they don't have a seat, then you just don't get to go. They can't force anybody to open a program.
That's true. Something to take into consideration when it comes to that. So now talking about that, how early should families begin preparing for the transition into adult services? And what initial steps do you recommend? Because you are saying that if there's not enough space for an adult, they're not going to make more as they would in school. So how early should families start preparing?
I think as soon as you start your child's transition plan, so when your child's 14, 15 years old and you're starting to put that transition plan together, I think it's really important for families to go out and look at the different programs. Where do you want your child to be participating in a program? Do you want it to be in your local neighborhood? Is your child okay traveling a distance if it's going to be a half an hour bus ride? All those things. Go and educate yourself about the programs that are out there, the different agencies that are out there. And I would, suggest to people to kind of almost put yourself on waiting lists early, because you can always say, drop me back if they call you, drop me down to the bottom of the list, not ready yet. But go and investigate. You want to be able to, again, knowledge is power. And sort of going and doing and going all these through all these things as early as possible. So again, working with your care coordinator, you can sort of put that on the list as, these are the agencies, when my child is ready, we've gone and we've seen their programs, we think these are the ones that are going to be the best fit for our family members. And so you can get ahead of it as much as possible.
That's true, and that's such a good tip about the list. And if you're not ready, maybe bump me down a little bit. Amazing tip. Now, what are some common mistakes in your experience that families maybe oversight when applying for adult services, and how can they be avoided so then they don't so the process doesn't take longer?
It's a lot of preparation. Especially if you don't apply for that CCO until your child is older. It's a pile of paperwork. You need to have a current, you need all the evaluations, they need to be current, which means within 3 years. That's why I almost encourage families to do it while your child is young, because they're already having to be reevaluated every 3 years. It's part of the educational system. And you don't need, you're only, when your child is 5, there's only so much paperwork on your kid because they're only 5. So it's easy to apply that CCO because they're only going to ask for that little bit, because that's all there is. When your child is older, now there's a bigger, longer history. They want all of that. And it becomes much more complicated to compile all of that. But yeah, it's a lot of paperwork. So again, you want to start, it's a process that takes time. It takes quite a bit of time, surprisingly more than people realize. Sometimes can take up to a year to get everything in place. So again, you don't want to wait till your child's leaving school and now you're first making application and you're like, oh, I didn't know I needed, and now you're having to go back to your child's school to try to get documents. You're trying to, and if your child's already still in school, it's so much easier to get all that paperwork that you need and much more likely to be up-to-date stuff.
Definitely. And being organized is kind of like the key, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, are there any ways for families to collaborate with employers or community organizations to support the inclusion and meaningful employment opportunities of these individuals without being overstepping their boundaries? Because now they're adults and we want them to make their own decisions and kind of grow, right? So, do you have any tips for families on how to do this?
And I think it's kind of the same thing that's what sort of came up during the presentation. Expose your child to a lot. Expose them to all different kinds of things, because you don't know what's that thing that's going to, inspire them in some way, that's going to catch their interest, that it's going to be something that they want to grow into as a career as they get older. Get to know the people in your community. Take your child into stores, into businesses, to introduce them to different, so that when your child, as your child's getting older, that there are people in the community who know them already and know their interest. If you have a child who can and is able to, that summer job, that once a week, even if it's a non-paid, going in and helping just to learn about stuff, and people, and again, those businesses to learn about people with disabilities. Oh, your kid goes on Saturdays and goes, they love animals and they go to the pet store on, Saturday afternoon, and they spend an hour on Saturdays and they help with, feeding the fish, whatever it is. But there's some, so that the employer gets to understand, oh, this is somebody with skills I never knew. Oh, and it's somebody who lives in the community, and they're being educated as well.
Very important to kind of bridge that,
Yeah.
right,
Got
between
to
the
create those
families.
bridges. We just got to go out and do it. Because unfortunately, there are just a lot of people out there who just don't know. They've never been exposed to people who are different than themselves. And so they just have either no thoughts at all, Or sometimes people have negative thoughts, again, because your
Yes.
default is, oh, if this person can't go out on their own, they must be dangerous. Like people, that's what their default is.
Yes. Now, what about children who have medical conditions and they are mandated to have nurses? What happens when they transition to day habs?
Those tend to be fulfilled better because it's a medical condition. But again, oftentimes, I mean, it's gonna be kind of a coordination between the agency providing the day hab and who's providing that medical support. There's got to be some coordination. Is that something that's being provided through that agency, or is that something separate that the family is arranging for to have that person come in? And so that's going to have to be coordination between the program and the family. And again, can that is the facility or the program still able to fulfill the needs for that person? Are they set up for, if this is a person with significant medical needs and they happen to use a wheelchair to get around, is this, this site, is it handicapped accessible? Do they, if it's if it's a day hab without walls, do they always have handicapped accessible transportation? Things that they, so things have to be, properly arranged to make sure that the program can fulfill all the needs of this individual.
Yes, small details like that can become really big issues if you don't plan ahead,
Yes.
right?
And that's why it's also, again, so important as you're, going through, as your child is in this transition process in high school, that you start to go and look ahead of time so that you'll have a sense of, oh yeah, this program's not going to work because look at the building they're in. This program, yeah, no place to go here. So again, they'll be better able to make decisions as to who are we going to apply to, who is most likely to be able to have those supports available to my child, so that again, it's going to be a successful transition.
Yes, and that is what we're hoping for. So, what about special equipment? What do families need to know before children transition, children that use special equipment?
Um, you should be able to get at all that through Medicaid. If these are things that your child, they've had a communication device, they've had, special equipment for feeding, they've had a wheelchair, they've had a chair for positioning, all those things they should be able to get through Medicaid. You just have to reapply for them because things like oftentimes like students' communication devices often belong to the school. So again, that's one of those things that I say to families before your family member graduates from school, apply to Medicaid to get their communication device. Because when they graduate, they have to give the one that the school gave to them back to the school. And you don't want them, because again, sometimes it takes a while if you're applying till they get that device to you, and you don't want to have that lag time where the person doesn't have a way to communicate. So sort of get ahead of it, saying, my child is graduating in a year, they use an iPad to communicate, it's got Proloquo to go on it, the iPad costs $1,000, Proloquo to go costs, $400. I need those things paid for because this is what my child uses to function.
Definitely. So working with the clinicians way in advance is
Yeah.
the best solution. So, Dr. Volpe, we only have time for one more question. And I know that parents are always thinking about IEPs and the IEP meeting and what are we going to use this beyond school for? So, what role do IEPs, and for participants that might not know, that is an individualized education plan, play in preparing students for the adult world, and how can transition goals be made more meaningful in this plan?
I think it's really important for families to sort of educate themselves, one, about how the IEP system works, how does the CSE run? It's important that they educate themselves about that because again, sometimes um, it's not as informative as it could be. Um, And so you really want to start to think about say to my educational staff when I'm working with them is preschoolers, we shoot for the moon because I have no idea what their potential is. So we shoot for the moon. Elementary school, we start to get a little real. We start to have a perspective of what is this kid's skills, where I think this kid may be going. By the time we get to middle school and high school, I have a pretty good sense of who this individual is, what kind of skills they have, and that now we're getting into now that transition plan is in place. So, okay, this is a person this is their aspiration in life. So now I really want to start to look at those educational goals and see now how well connected are they to what is this person's aspiration for transition and on a realistic level. If I'm 17 and I can't read and I can't spell, I should not be tracing my name anymore. Like that shouldn't be one of my goals anymore, is learning how to trace my name, because that's not going to serve me in my life. So it's looking at some of those things to say, how does this fit? How is this going to get this person the skills they need so that they can get to that transition that they want in the most reasonable way? And things that they're going to be able to, again, we want to put goals in place that they can reasonably aspire to put ridiculous things in
Right.
place that they're never going to achieve. For what purpose?
Yes, most definitely. So, Dr. Volpe, I'm so sorry. How can parents or individuals enroll for the CRO list, the Certified Residential Opportunities List,
Through the CCO.
through the CCO?
Everything
Wonderful.
goes through the CCO. That's
Wonderful.
why I say do it early, because everything now they have, because they sort of wanted to streamline the process by not getting bits and pieces from everywhere. By centralizing it, they get all the kind of groups together, but there's one person organizing it.
Yes, definitely. So, Dr. Volpe, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.